Good news, everyone! New keyboards arrived. As I mentioned in the last video, I had ordered a normal stock keyboard for the CF-19 to replace the horrible, hideous rubber mush board that it came with. Now, I know, a lot of people really like those because they're waterproof and durable, but frankly, I can't type on it worth crap, and I need this laptop to be usable for typing. So I ordered this sucker here. I think it was around $15 on eBay with free shipping. Not terrible, but not the best. It did get slightly bent in transit. I don't know if you can see there, but there's a little bit of kind of wrinkling to the surface of there, but I was able to straighten it out. Hopefully that doesn't impact its usability. All the keys still seem to work fine on it, so I'm hoping that's okay. I wish the seller would have packaged it a little bit better. Basically all they did was throw this between a couple pieces of cardboard, relatively thin cardboard, tape it together and toss it in a little foam padded envelope, and that really isn't good enough to protect a keyboard, especially one that's as flimsy and flexible as this. It's actually a very, very thin and flexible keyboard. That doesn't really matter since, well, as long as it's in the laptop, it's up against something very solid, so you shouldn't really get any flex out of it anyway. It does have some little adhesive pads on the back, but they're pretty well covered in dirt. So those really won't do much, but I don't think they'll really be necessary. So the first thing you're going to want to do with your laptop, if it's not already off, turn it off. This one's in sleep mode. You could probably do this while it's on, but I would not recommend it. Who knows what that's going to do to the motherboard if you pull the keyboard out and reinsert it. I've done that to laptops before, ones that were having keyboard issues, just for some sort of troubleshooting process, but it's definitely not recommended to do that to a machine ever. These were like really garbage machines that I was doing that on, like stuff that's literally worth nothing. So, but yeah, shut down the machine. We're going to go ahead and close that on up for a second, pull the battery out now that it is shut down. Pop that out, just for good measures. Again, probably not necessary, but better to be safe than sorry. Open her back up. Now, the only real screws to get the keyboard up are these four ones up here in the corners, or on these little back covers. They are a Phillips screw, and there are four of them. I'm just going to use this little precision screwdriver here. Swivel that just out of the way a little bit. Get in here and take those on out. It's a really pretty easy laptop to remove the keyboard on. Now, it's kind of interesting how these how the keyboard's held in. It's really only held in by that little tab there. It just pushes down on the keyboard and kind of squeezes it in place. That's a unique design. I kind of like it. It's simple. This other side actually has two tabs, but the same principle applies. Now, you may find that the keyboard is quite difficult to remove, and that's because they actually use adhesive to hold the keyboard in. This particular one has been removed once before, so let me get in here and remove this metal plate. And there are the tabs that I was talking about. Now let's see if this will come out nicely. That's a big no. That is not going to cooperate. Not in the slightest. So I'm again going to rotate this out of the way and see if I can't get something under there to pry it up with, just a hair. There we go. That wasn't so bad. I would recommend not using a Phillips screwdriver to do that, but whoop, and it dropped back down in. Dang it. This is a bit fiddly. I'll admit it's a bit tricky to get these out of here, especially the rubber ones. You want to try not to damage the keyboard, because the rubber keyboards are actually worth quite a bit secondhand. And I wouldn't mind reselling this one, because I have absolutely no use for it whatsoever. It does have a minor imperfection, if you can see. Probably can't see, but right above the F2 key there's a small split in the keyboard itself. But this is a very thick rubber keyboard, where this one is extremely thin. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out, to see the difference in thickness. Although when they're next to each other, they're really not too incredibly different. So I think it should still work fine. Now you'll notice there's a little plate down here in the bottom, and we're going to have to remove that to get to the ribbon cable connector on here. This is actually to keep the machine sealed. I'm going to have to get a different screwdriver. Bear with me. Different screwdriver. I apologize for the noise in the background, by the way. I've got a 3D print running over there. That will be showcased in a later video. But for now, let's get back on to removing these screws. There's just 3 of them, and this little plate is actually gasketed. It's to help keep moisture out, so if any water would happen to get under the keyboard, it will not go into the machine, or at least it shouldn't go into the machine. Now this process should be the same for all revisions of the CF-19. This one happens to be a Mark 1, but it should be the same all the way up to, I forget what revision they're on now, like 7 or something. So yeah. So we're just going to want to pull up on the little ribbon cable connector to release it. Just be very careful. You can use like a little flat blade screwdriver to do it, but I would recommend that you do it with your fingers or fingernails just to avoid any damage to the connector. And this one has a little backlight ribbon cable connector as well. Just pull up on that and it will release. And there you go. There's the keyboard removed. Now that is a good serviceable part, although it does have a little bit of damage. You can see here the F2 key. There's just a little split there. I don't know if it's going to focus on that. Yeah, it's not a huge deal, but it does make that keyboard not really waterproof anymore, so it kind of defeats the purpose of it. Now mine has this sticker from the seller on it, but I'm just going to leave that on there since it shouldn't really affect anything. It's not thick. So I'm just going to leave that in place. And this one does not have the backlight connector, so we aren't going to worry about that. However, if you were installing either the rubber keyboard or the emissive backlight or backlit keyboard, you would want to install that into its corresponding little connector in there. It's actually not a ZIF connector. That one that the backlight cable goes into, you actually have to press into place. So it'd be a good idea to install that before the other one because it actually goes under it. Alright, now that is in place. Let's go ahead and put our little sealing panel. You can see the rubber gasket around there. It's more of a foam than a rubber, but it should keep moisture out fairly well anyway. I'm going to go ahead and put that back where it belongs. You have to use a very, very fine point Phillips screwdriver for this. The other one wasn't quite fine enough. It's surprising because these are actually pretty darn similar screwdrivers. I thought they were the same size, but I guess not. This one must just be a hair thinner. It's always good to keep around a precision set of Phillips screwdrivers when you're working on laptops. You never know what kind you're going to run into that you need. Alright, there's that back in place. Now the keyboard just folds over like so. And these little tabs flip under like that. Now the keyboard is in. That feels 1,000 times better than it did before, let me tell you. Although still not a fantastic keyboard. I gotta admit, the CF-19's, your best option's probably the emissive backlit keyboard. Those would probably be a little bit better feeling. But they're expensive, and I don't feel like spending $90 on a keyboard. So this is the one that I settled with. It's the cheapest of them, and it's the second best for typing. It is nice to have the backlit keyboard though. So if you get one of these that has, if you have the option of getting one of these with the emissive backlit keyboard, definitely if you can get it for about the same price as one without it, go for the one with the emissive backlit, not the rubber. If you see one with the rubber keyboard, unless you need the waterproofing, don't bother because it's disgusting. Now, I mean, it's not exactly expensive to replace this. This is $15 for this keyboard. But it's nice if you don't have to. Of course, that's just one more expense, you know. Now, it does appear that the keyboard is still slightly warped there, but it's alright. There's very little travel on these keys. Let's hope that this thing works. I really hope it didn't get damaged in shipping. Finish putting these screws in, then we'll power it up and see if she works. I hope it does. One last screw. It's a bit of a pain. I'm sorry if my arm's in the way here. But we're basically just reversing the process, so... yeah, that feels a lot better. Doesn't look quite as good, but hey. You notice there's a little bit of play in the back of the keyboard there. It should have a double-sided tape adhesive to hold it down. I'll probably open it back up and put a piece of double-sided tape right there just to keep it from flexing. But, oh, I need to put the battery back in. Boy, I'm an idiot. I forgot to put the battery in. Let's go ahead and stick that back in where it belongs. I do love those little doors. Even though they do break off all the time, I still like to have them there. As long as you're careful with them, they're great. Alright. Machine is powering on. Let's see if we can get into the BIOS. Check and see if it works in here. Yes, she works perfectly in here. Exit without saving. Looks like the keyboard is going to work. Have to do a little test. I can tell there's definitely a bit of a warp to the entire keyboard, so apparently it did get flexed quite heavily in shipping. I'm really not going to worry about that since it didn't harm the keyboard as far as I can tell, but it's definitely going to be better. I would have rather the seller shipped it a little bit better, packaged it a little bit nicer, but hey, I guess they offer free shipping, so they're gonna get it to you as cheaply as possible so it doesn't cost them anything. This does take a little while to boot up. Not sure if that's a byproduct of the slow hard drive or the incredibly slow processor, or a combination of both. I would imagine probably a combination of both. We do have a cursor, so it's booting. Hard drive's crunching away. It's got a 500 gig hard drive in here, but I really don't need that kind of space in a machine like this. Alright, okay. Not sure what it's doing there. But yeah, there we go. It has booted up. And let's go ahead and open up LibreOffice Writer so we can do a little test. I'll go ahead and move the camera on up here, zoom it on in, and type the good old generic phrase, hello, YouTube. And look, it works. And it is much nicer to use than the other keyboard. This is a test of the new keyboard. Still a little bit hard to get used to. But yes, it works, and it seems to work well. Alright guys, well, I think that's about it. We've got the new keyboard successfully installed. As I said, I'm probably going to take this back off and put a little bit of double-sided tape under it, just for added stiction, because it has a tendency to want to rise up in the middle, which is kind of weird. But aside from that, this is done. Take it easy, guys. Y'all have a good one.